we can kind of jet through some of the basics and walk you through the resources for class. And then I have a lecture starting to talk about scientific inquiry today. All right, so I posted the syllabus, and keep in mind I'm teaching 2 sections of intro bio, and I got super lazy and did 1 syllabus for both, right? So it's going to list both the information. You guys are clearly the Tuesday, Thursday section. I do want to note that I accidentally put 9:30 in my email for class start time, and the Zoom link, it only lets you schedule at half an hour increments. So you can log on at 9:20, we'll start at 9:20 moving forward. My contact information is up here. So the best way to get a hold of me is by email. You can email me pretty readily through Canvas. You can also email directly to my West Valley account. The email address is listed here. I will please ask you guys to put your name in the email, maybe reference the class that you're in, write in sentences, make sure you're asking direct questions, so that, I know who you are and I can kind of deduce or have to use less deduction powers to answer your questions. So clear emails, please. I've had 3 email exchanges with this gal who just keeps emailing me 4 words. I want to add. That's it. No name, nothing. Right? I want to add. Like, there's no information in this email. I want to add. I don't know where you want to add. I want to add. So my new strategy is, if you send me an email like that, I'm going to send you an article homework assignment to read on how to send an appropriate email. Yeah. All right. So all jokes aside, here are my office hours. If you navigated through the Canvas page, you got to find the module that has all your course links. All right. So there's a course link for the Zoom, of course, and also for office hours. It's a different Zoom link, right, so that it's accessible by all my different courses. So I'm available these times right in here. Generally, what I'll do is when you log into the Zoom office hour, it'll drop me an email that somebody's in there, and I'll hop on, rather than to run the Zoom program for hours and nobody shows up, right? So just drop into the office hour and then just give me like a couple minutes to get in. I'm watching the email to see if anybody's dropped in. Alternately, you can drop me an email that you're going to show up at 11 and I'll be there. Right? So here are my designated times. I also do office hours by appointment. I know that things are a little bit wonky with everybody's online courses and shelter in place. So, I'm trying to be as accessible as possible. So if you can't make these times, just drop me an email and we'll work out an alternate time to meet up in that Zoom room. All right, so you have a few materials that you need for the course. The textbook, I don't give assignments out of the text. I use it primarily as a resource for you to utilize to reinforce the material that we're covering in lecture, in case you want a different description of gene expression, or you want different pictures, or you just want to use it for preview or for studying. I don't assign like chapters. I give you the reference chapters for what we're talking about, but it is your job, right, to use that resource. If you're never going to open the textbook, then don't buy it, right? You are responsible for the material that we cover in class. Not everything that I cover is going to be in the textbook, but pretty much, it's a good framework for what we're going to be talking about. The second item you're going to need, you should be enrolled for a concurrent lab section. This is a lecture lab requirement. You need that lab to fulfill your, I think it's 5B lab requirement, right? So you need to be concurrently enrolled if you haven't taken the lab already. So for the lab, you're going to need the lab manual. And the lab manual is only available at the bookstore. It's only available at the bookstore. We write it ourselves in-house. We publish it in-house so that it's tailored specifically to the activities that we're going to do. The benefit to this also, one of the big reasons why we did this is because it's a lot more cost effective for you guys. So rather than go with a prefab lab manual from a publisher that's going to cost you $130, I think this one maybe cost you $20 or $30 at the bookstore. The drawback is you can only get it at the bookstore because we literally take it to the printer, pick it up, and drop it off at the bookstore. It's not available anywhere online, right, other than at the bookstore. The printer was affected by the fires, so we haven't been able to pick up the lab manual. I think the last batch of lab manuals, I think they're opening today, so we'll be picking them up and taking them to the bookstore, and they'll be mailed out within 24 to 48 hours. So if you haven't ordered that already, go ahead and get that. Your lab instructor probably contacted you already. We're going to be giving you the free digital versions of the lab until you can receive your lab manuals. Unexpected delays with that. The other thing you're going to need to pick up is your lab kit. So again, hopefully your lab instructor sent you an email already. Starting today, you're going to be picking up lab kits that are going to have materials that you're going to be using to run your experiments and complete your lab activities at home. Each instructor has a different lab kit, right? So they should have sent you an email with your color for your lab section. You're going to go and pick up your lab kit that's color coded. Maybe it's, I can't remember what the red or green, I don't know. It depends on your lab instructor. If you didn't get an email from your lab instructor, they will also be cross-referenced by course CRN. So have that CRN that you're registered for handy. There are signs directing you to park in parking lot 2, and take the follow the signs to get to where the lab kit pickup is. We have to direct flow traffic so you guys aren't crossing paths. Please maintain social distancing and wear a mask, obviously, as you're picking up materials. And yeah, just be proactive. There should be posters that designate, which kit you should be picking up. There's also signs on the actual table, right, that are color coded to your lab section, directing you which kits to pick up. There's multiple classes that are picking up, so be really diligent in paying attention that you're picking up the correct kit. Make sense? Okay. All right. Kits. So again, I'm not going to read all this information. You are good to review the course content, right? Conduct in class. Attendance is mandatory. We're going to be having little questions back and forth. I'm going to be doing little maybe mini discussions in here sometimes to get you guys engaged and allow you the opportunity to ask questions, right? So our section is set up as a synchronous section. If you're looking for something asynchronous, you might want to maybe find a different section for an instructor who's teaching asynchronously. You have options for both. So we'll be meeting full class period on Zoom here Tuesdays and Thursdays. I know there's been some confusion that the TR in the schedule stands for Tuesday, Thursday. It's not just a Thursday class. Withdrawing, just like any other class, if you choose to not complete the class, please make sure you go through that process of withdrawing. Otherwise, you run the risk of ending up in that class at the end of the semester with a grade that you do not want on your transcripts. There's 2 web pages that we're going to be using this semester, and I'll walk you through those in just a minute. So I'll come back to the instructor web page and also the Canvas page. I put links in the syllabus. There's also links on the Canvas page to my instructor web page. I encourage you to kind of read through the lecture format and the information on academic integrity, especially the testing policies. So hopefully you've read through the email that I sent out and got your Proctorio set up and got all your technology needs taken care of. If you have any special accommodations, any physical learning disabilities that I should be aware of to help you successfully navigate class, please drop me an email. Unfortunately, with this online format, I don't have the opportunity to get an info card from you guys giving you the opportunity to touch base with me on any accommodations that you need. So if you could please just substitute by dropping me an email. Again, make sure your name is in there and your class section and a clear description, please, please, please. I do want to spend a couple minutes here talking about health and stress management. There's a lot of weird stressors that we are experiencing right now with shelter in place. Many people are feeling, maybe socially insecure or economically insecure. There's, you know, a lot of polarization that we're seeing right now, and a lot of violence out there. So, you know, it can be stressful, even sometimes if we're not consciously aware that it's stressful times. So, you know, please, be gentle with yourselves, and utilize the resources that are available for you on campus if you need to, right? I'm here to help you out, and to chit chat with you if you need anything. You can reach out to me. We also have counseling on campus that's been ramped up to help people deal with some of the stress that we're facing right now. And also, there's an Office of Student Needs, which I can't speak highly enough about. They're doing a really great job at supporting students. And one of the things that we're seeing is that students are like, well, that's not for me. Well, those resources are there for you. There's technology support. They have Wi-Fi hotspots if you're struggling. They have loaner computers. They had tons of leftover loaner computers that students didn't check out last semester. They have tablets. They have emergency loans. They have anything that you can imagine. They have resources for you guys. They're offering free box lunches. If you're feeling food, struggling to afford food, there's box lunches. They're also giving away groceries weekly. Again, lots and lots of resources. This week they're handing out care packages, right, which have school supplies that you might find useful. So take advantage of those resources. They're in place for you. Right? And then study time, I like to mention this in intro bio. Many times students come into intro bio with this experience where they haven't really had to spend time on class or study in the past. And that's generally not the experience for a bio class, right? You're in a college level class at this point, and your expectations are going to be pretty high for you to master that information. I can provide you the best lecture I can possibly put together, and it might make sense as I'm describing it to you, but that doesn't automatically embed it in your brain. You have to process that information in order for it to stick. So I like to mention study time, right? You want to maybe build a schedule. I mentioned this in the email that I send out. Scheduling study time is always helpful at the beginning of the semester, because it helps us to kind of get a routine set, that habit of spending a little time reviewing. So studying doesn't have to be, a 10-hour session. Right? It turns out that doesn't work so well for our brains and the way that we process information. You end up super saturated and it's not very effective. But what does help is a little bit of review every day, right? So if you allocate 20 minutes every day to review what we talked about the day before or preview what we're going to be talking about, if you just spend 10, 15 minutes after class kind of reviewing what we covered, right, that reinforcement is going to be really impactful for your ability to retain the information. Study after study has showed that the more recently after you learn something that you review it, the more effectively that it sticks in your brain, right? So spending 20 minutes every day is going to be a lot more effective than trying to cram 10 hours before the first exam. Right? I can't encourage you enough. And I know it's hard, right? I took a class this summer and it's really hard sometimes. So after you're done with class, be like, okay, I'm going to sit and spend 10, 15 more minutes thinking about this class, but it's really, really, really effective. So keep that in mind. And the other thing that I will mention now is that thinking about how you study, right? Oftentimes, the most frequent thing that I hear from students is, I spent all this time studying and I'm still not getting the grade that I want. And a lot of that has to do with the way that you're studying. It's always easy and natural to input information, review your notes, look at the PowerPoints, skim the textbook and reinforce what you've learned in class. Those are great, effective first step study tools, right? Once you've input that information and reviewed, remember that you also, in your studying, need to plan for exporting that information, right? You need to be studying the output, right? The pulling that information from your brain and, communicating it back. That's a different neural pathway than the input pathway. You have to study that pathway as well, because when you're tested, you're not tested on how well you can study and input information. You're tested on how well you can output information. And I think that this is a common pitfall, is that students study in their input. You feel really familiar with the information. It feels really good. I've studied. I'm ready for this exam. How many of you have walked into an exam feeling really good, and then you halfway through the exam and you're like, oh shit, I didn't know this information as well as I thought I did. Right? We call that your oh shit moment, right? And so what you want to do is you want to shift that moment from the exam day, right, a high stakes assignment, to small homework assignments, right? So I'll give you homework assignments to help you practice that output. I also highly encourage you guys to form study groups, because as you are talking to other people about the material, you are outputting, right? It's the easiest way to see where you need or where you have gaps in your knowledge, right? So the other thing that I find is, as we're in lecture or sitting in a meeting or whatever, right? We zone in and out and in and out. Right? When you form a study group, hopefully you have a partner that was zoning in and out asynchronously to you, right? So in the areas where you're feeling a little bit weak because you didn't understand a concept, or you were zoning out for a minute, hopefully your study partner can fill in those gaps, right? And generally, bio is very, very, very broad. We're going to cover a wide array of topics, and usually, folks will, I do really well in chemistry, but the body systems didn't work so well for me. So by working with a study group, you can help each other out. Yeah. So again, study groups are a great resource for you guys. The other thing that I highly suggest is, if you don't want to form a study group, you can't fit it into your schedule, talk about what you're learning. Explain it to your roommates, to your parents, to your siblings. When I was in college, I lived on my own, and so I lectured to my dog every day what I was learning in class, right? And again, the best way to know if you have a handle on that information is if you can explain photosynthesis to someone and all the steps, then you know it well. And it's really clear when you're explaining it to someone and you get through the first 2 steps and you're like, oh, you stumble on the third. It's very clear to you, oh, I need to go back and study that third, practice my input again until you master that material. So try explaining it. Even if you're just explaining it to yourself out loud, it really helps you to identify where you have gaps in knowledge and need to invest more in studying. So I'll try and maybe do a little video or something with helpful study techniques later on as we approach the first exam. I know on the first day it's hard to absorb everything. So your evaluation in class, right? You've got points that are coming from being engaged and contributing to class discussions and activities and being in class. You also have points that are going to be associated with homework assignments. So you'll have your first homework assignment later on this week. I have a scientific inquiry short assignment for you guys to do after Thursday's class. Quizzes, right? So for example, your syllabus quiz, those points will go into this pot of assignment points. And then the bulk of your points, of course, are going to be from exams where you're being tested on knowledge, right? So really a big chunk of your grades. So you want to make sure that you are studying for those exams. The only other thing I want to point out about grades, right, is grade breakdown. We've got in the bio department a standard A, standard B, but our C range is 65 to 79.9%, which sometimes helps the non-bio majors, right? Biology can be kind of tough because it's like learning 2 new languages, a combination of Greek and Latin, right? So it's very terminology based in many cases. So that can be kind of hard to wrap your minds around if that's not how you're used to processing information. Again, there's plenty of resources on campus to help you navigate this course if you're having a hard time. As soon as you start to struggle, you should be contacting me to give you some advice or come to office hours to ask questions. Again, study services, you've got study groups, pardon me, and support services are there if you're having technology issues or financial issues or, despair. Support services is there to help you out. And then tutoring center. The gals, Jen Wagner over at the tutoring center is doing a bang up job at moving all the tutoring onto an online format, and they're really, really helpful over there. You're paying for tutoring as part of your tuition, so you might as well take advantage of it. Important dates, holidays listed here. You guys have, I think, just one holiday at Thanksgiving. As you're scrolling down, remember I was lazy and I put all the information for both sections in one syllabus. So notice the schedule has the wrong dates, and that's because this is the Monday, Wednesday classes schedule. If you keep scrolling down, there's your tentative lecture schedule. And I say tentative because sometimes we'll fall behind and sometimes we'll get ahead. It's just a rough guidance for what we're going to be covering, right? So here you can take a look at our broad array of topics that we're going to cover. We're going to start with our first unit, looking at the small a scale of life, looking at chemistry and molecules that are fundamental to living organisms' metabolisms. We'll talk a little bit about scientific inquiry this first week, or maybe a lot. We'll talk about scientific inquiry, hopefully. And then a little bit of self structure that will set us up for Unit 2, where we're going to really dig in deep to the cell and everything that's happening in the cell, from the major metabolic pathways that occur in the cell, the chemical reactions in there, to how cells divide, how DNA works, how we pass on DNA, patterns of inheritance. So in my opinion, this tends to be, this second unit tends to be the hardest for most folks that are non-bio majors, because it's a little bit hard to imagine, cellular respiration happening in all your cells as we speak, right? Unit 3 is going to be a little bit about body systems. So we'll learn about your focusing on your human body so that you understand how your body functions. And then the last unit will be evolution and ecology, right? So a real broad array of biological topics that we'll be taking a look at. Any questions? It was a lot. Cicely, go ahead.
So for the assignment, so it's a weekly, right? And this is an online quiz. And when is like the deadline we have to turn in, finish the quiz or homework?
All right, so let's take a look at that next. So let's take a look at that Canvas. Right. So hopefully, right, as an industrious, prepared student, you have already perused the Canvas classes for your courses. You should always be doing that ahead of your class so that you're all ready to go. So if you've been to the course Canvas page, you've read the introduction to our class. And hopefully you've explored a little bit some of the resources that are here for you, right? So the main place that you're going to be utilizing on this Canvas page is this module tab here. So under the modules, this is where you're going to find helpful information. This is also where your assignments and quizzes are going to be posted. You can link over to the modules from this little hyperlink here. There's also a hyperlink on the left of the screen, and after you finish reading down here, there's another hyperlink below. So any of those hyperlinks will take you to the modules page, right? And very top module are all the course links, right? So instructor webpage, I'll come back to in a minute. The link for office hours is listed here. The link for your Zoom lecture is here. And then that email that I sent you out a couple times last week directed you to this introduction module, right, where you have all the info that you need to get started. So, of course, you guys already all registered for Zoom, right? There's getting started with Proctorio. There's a lab kit pickup map that's going to direct you exactly where to go, and follow the arrows. It'll tell you the flow of traffic. Right? There's that welcome email in case you missed it. I put it in a Word document here. There's a copy of the syllabus, and here's a syllabus quiz. Right? So on your syllabus quiz, it'll give you when it's due. Right? That'll also show on your calendar, which I'll come back to in a second. Right? So you've got support services, where I put just direct links to make it easier for you to access the services that are on campus. This is not entirely inclusive, but it was some of the highlights that I thought you might be interested in. And then there's technology support if you're struggling with Zoom or Canvas. There's some useful links here. And then there's your first assignment, which I think will pop up. It might not be visible on your guys' Canvas site yet, because I don't think I released it until after Thursday's class. But I think if you go to your Canvas, you can go to calendar. Slow. And your assignment should pop up there as well. They should also pop up on your to-do list. So I would spend some time on Canvas if you're not familiar, getting, kind of acquainted with the way that it displays activities to you, right? And then if you click on it, it'll tell you when it's due. And keep in mind the times. Good?
Okay, thank you so much.
Any questions on Canvas? No? All right. Okay.
No.
Last, where am I?
I do have a question. Sorry, my computer was acting annoying. So our first assignment isn't due till the 6th, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Sweet, thank you.
I would do the syllabus sooner rather than later. I just put the due date later because with the instability at the beginning of the semester, I usually have to keep like opening it up, and it's kind of a pain. So I just extended the deadline to avoid that. Why is this not showing? Okay. All right. Last place I want to show you is that instructor webpage. So again, this class is not usually taught online, so we're kind of hobbling through. So some of the resources are going to be on my regular Instruct webpage that I would be using in a normal scenario. The Instruct webpage link is at the top of your Canvas page. It's also listed on the syllabus. You can go to the West Valley College homepage and search my name, and it'll direct you to the instructor webpage. So this is independent of Canvas. And I really like this webpage because it provides you resources that are available to you forever, right? Or for as long as I'm teaching and maintaining this webpage. So you're not locked out of it after a Canvas class is finished, right? You can continually use the resources that are here for you. So you've got contact information, you've got my office hours listed here, you've got schedule, where's Letitia? Oh, maybe she's not responding because she's in class, right? And then here are links to all the courses that I teach at West Valley. There's a top link here, which is the generic Bio 10 webpage, gives information for all the different Bio 10 sections. The second Bio 10 link here is specific to our section, our class. So, or my two classes, my two lectures. But the content is the same, right? So it gives you a little bit of intro info. And then these tabs up here where you want to maybe become a little bit more familiar with the Instruct page. You've got a copy of the syllabus here in case you didn't get it from Canvas or can't find it on Canvas for whatever reason. I doubled up the schedule here. Again, there's Monday, Wednesday section, your Tuesday, Thursday. So you'll look at the Tuesday, Thursday schedule. And there's the lectures, right? So all the PowerPoints are here on the Instruct webpage. It turns out Canvas has file size limitations that I didn't want to deal with. So I'm just leaving them populated here. They're all available to you, right? So I provide you the lecture PowerPoints so that you have access to that material and can use it as a study tool and as a reference as we're lecturing. As I'm talking, there's going to be a lot of material on these PowerPoints that we're going to be going through relatively quickly. Oftentimes students have the temptation to try and copy every bit of information that's on the slide. I'm not looking for you guys to do that. You have the PowerPoints. You have all that content already. Take notes on the material that's not on the PowerPoint slides. And that's material that you're not going to have access to later. You're going to get very quickly frustrated if you're trying to keep up with writing everything down as I'm talking about it. It's just going to go too fast, right? You're not going to be able to do that. So you can download the PowerPoints ahead of time. You can print them out as handouts that, print them 3 or 4 slides to a page so you can write notes on them or label the diagrams that are in there if you want. There's on the handouts tab, a handout for how to print the lectures if you want to do that, or you can just type on them and EndNote or directly via PowerPoint. There's tips for success here, how to think about studying and how to approach it. And then there's all the study guides for the semester are on here. And then occasionally I might direct you to assignments here. I'm going to try and cross list them on Canvas. Everything will be submitted through Canvas. I wouldn't go through and start working on these because, I mix and match depending on our pace and kind of where we're focusing our attention on. So this is just keep a set of assignments there, and then sometimes I'll direct you to a particular assignment. So they're all there just to make things a little bit more expedient. And then resources, I think it's just another listing of the books that are required for class. Good. Instructor webpage. Any questions on the instructor webpage? New? All right. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. Close out that. Awesome. We've got some good time left to.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So it's the instructor page, web pages show us, and also the Canvas, are they, the contents you put on both sides is the same or similar, or they have some difference, something I can find like on Canvas, some is on your instructor page?
The instructor page will have the lectures and the study guides.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. So this week we're going to be focusing on sorry, I'm trying to pull up my lecture notes. We're going to be focusing on scientific inquiry and scientific literacy. This is a really, really important topic. I think there's no topic that's more topical for this time in history, right? We're seeing some of the negative impacts of a society that is not scientifically literate, right? So I think this is one of the most important lectures for me through the course of the semester, because this is where we talk a little bit about the process of science and how it works. I think that this is incredibly important because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and navigating the scientific process and the scientific language is sometimes challenging for an average non-biologist or non-scientist. So we're going to talk a little bit about why is there so much misunderstanding of science, and kind of hopefully clear up some of the misinformation that's out there, just maybe a little bit, right? So far we've talked about course policies, right? Usually if you have a question about the course, you're going to find the answer in the syllabus, right? So again, make sure that you're reading that syllabus. and completing your syllabus quiz. In terms of the course overall, I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes giving you an overview of what we're going to be learning, right? So over the course of the semester, so that you have some expectations of what's coming your way. So one of the biggest concepts that we're going to be talking about all throughout the semester is looking at this interaction between living and non-living, right? Biology, ology means the study of, and bio means life, right? So we're going to be focusing on living organisms, but it turns out that the non-living landscape sets the stage. It sets the driving forces for evolution. It sets the materials that we need in order for a living body to function. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that interaction between living and non-living starting this week. Starting next week. So after we learn a little bit about scientific inquiry this week, we're going to move on and start talking about chemistry, right? And chemistry, as it turns out, is its own scientific field, but it is quintessential to understanding biological systems. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about chemistry and the reactivity of different chemical elements and how that contributes to the properties of different biological molecules. So we'll talk about how those non-living chemical elements are critical to supporting a living organism. At the end of the semester, we're also going to focus on this concept quite a bit as we're talking about ecology and evolution as organisms are living in environments with different non-living parameters, different climate patterns, for example, and how they evolve and adapt to those conditions, right? So we'll spend a lot of time talking about living and non-living, and it'll pop out as we're talking about cells and as we're talking about body systems. We'll reference back to the non-living aspects that we need to support those functions. We'll spend quite a bit of time with cells, right? How cells function, principles of heredity, understanding DNA, how it's built, how it copies itself, how it is expressed, and also how we pass it on from generation to generation. It turns out that that's pretty fundamentally important for the process of evolution, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the semester. And we'll also talk quite a bit about the human body. So Unit 3 is going to be all about major body systems so that you have an understanding of how your body works. It's pretty important for being able to make good choices for your body and your health. And then again, we'll wrap up at the end of the semester with ecology and evolution. That is, my background is in ecology, evolution, and physiology. So the tail end of the semester is some of my most favorite material to talk about. All right, so scientific literacy. Why is it so important? Why is it that people are becoming so unprepared to navigate through the scientific landscape? So part of the reason why we're seeing undermining in scientific literacy is because of science that's in the media. Right? And yesterday I was talking to my students about this Gallup poll I received a few years ago, and I was super excited because I'd always heard about the Gallup poll. Have you guys heard of the Gallup poll? The major polling institution in the United States. And I'm like, oh, I get to give my opinion. I love giving my opinion. So I get my Gallup form in the mail, and it was a kind of a crack up because they send you a crisp brand new $1, right, to pay you for your time. So I got $1 for completing the Gallup poll. And I sat down and I got my brand new West Valley pencil all sharpened and ready to go. And I start filling out this form. I'm like, my name, my information. And then I get to the questions, and the first one's like, okay, yeah, media. Great, we're going to talk. This poll was all about media and the impact on society. And it was the most reflective and kind of stressful experience, as it turned out, because every question I'd answer would just lead to this big, like, oh, I don't know, right? So they ask questions like, is the internet good or bad for human society? And I was like, oh, good, of course, right? We got all this information. And then I start thinking about all the misinformation and all the implications of that to, the environment, to human health, to, everything pretty much. And it was kind of traumatic as every question led to this real like epiphany of the bad side of all the access to information that we have. So it was kind of an interesting experience. But I think that one of the things that I really reflected on is how the media has influenced scientific literacy, right? We've got, we think that science is kind of cool in this abstract way where we don't really understand how it works, and we like sciencey things, and we like to think that we're thinking scientifically. But in reality, a lot of our perceptions of science and how the scientific process works is learned from the media, is learned from sciencey TV shows. And people watch, Law and Order, and they think that they can do better than a detective that's got 30 years experience, right? A little bit of information is a little bit sometimes empowering, which is a good thing, unless you don't realize that you don't know everything. But my point here is that a lot of these sciencey shows really misrepresent the scientific process and how it works, and that's because they are designed for entertainment. Right. And so we have to be careful if we're pulling our understanding and our interpretation of what science is from a TV show, right? You have to recognize that it is a TV show. It is entertainment. There's also a lot of science media out there, right? So there's some, good resources, and there's some maybe less good resources. And sometimes a good resource has a author that's not very scientifically literate, so their interpretation might not be on task. Right. So you have to be really careful. And I think that one of the things that frustrates folks the most is the seemingly conflicting information that's out there, right? Where you're reading headlines that have been sensationalized again for entertainment. Coffee's good for you. No, coffee's bad for you. Chocolate's good for you. Chocolate's bad for you, right? It's hard to make sense of the scientific information that's out there, right? So being able to navigate that, I think, is a skill. Right. And it takes a little bit of practice, and it takes a little bit of intent. Right. It's something that we need to think about. And that's not something we like to do these days. We like to be able to just Google very quickly and have an answer. Right. So we're going to hopefully encourage you in here to really kind of think about what you're seeing out there and what you're reading, because it's impactful to your health, to our society, to the environment, right? So making good decisions and being a responsible citizen is all about being educated and being scientifically literate, right? So what's going on with the seemingly conflicting information that we can sometimes see out there? And I've got lots of little bummer moments of things that we can't do online. But one of the things I love to do on the first day of class is play the telephone game. Have you guys ever played the telephone game? Where you kind of whisper around, right? What happens to your message as you're playing the telephone game?
It tends to change.
It tends to change, right? And where your starter sentence was maybe, the red fire engine went blazing down the bumpy road, right? That is a message, right? It conveys meaning. You can kind of picture it in your mind. And by the end that you get to the end of the game, maybe your message is now, the red truck went down the road. It's kind of similar, but now you have a totally different visual. Some of your meaning was lost. That makes sense? Not all the information was conveyed. And while there was red and there was truck and there was road in that first sentence, it's not the same message, right? And so this happens a lot in the scientific process. I think this is a really big issue out there, right? The telephone game, this is how it happens, right? When you are, and this is one of the challenges of modern day scientists, right? And one of the faults of the scientific community, right? Because the scientific community plays a role in this, lack of literacy. So part of the scientific process is the more you get into your field, the more specialized you get, the more specialized language that you start to use. That's not necessarily translatable to grandma, right? I always think about my mom, right? When I talk about this, right? So that's a fault of the scientists, right? That we as scientists need to learn how to communicate so that someone who's not a peer, someone who's not another scientist that understands our language, right, can understand what we're saying. And right now, the way that it works is those scientists with that scientific language have to be interpreted, right? It has to be interpreted so that your grandma can understand the message, right? And so what happens is you get the scientists publishing in scientific journals, which is targeted to other scientists with that same background, right? And folks translate, right? Journalists translate those scientific articles and report on it. Or there's a press release by the university or the organization that the scientist is working at. And they're kind of summarizing the scientist's study. And then the reporter gets it, and then the news, evening news gets it. And by the time you've telephone gamed all the way to grandma, it's your same principle where your message has been lost or translated in a way that's not quite the intent of what the scientist was trying to communicate, right? So some of the content might be correct, but it might now be out of context, right? And it might now have been pared back so much down to the red truck went down the road, right? Which is very different than the red fire truck went down the bumpy road, right? And so we see this loss and misinterpreted information. And what happens if somebody along this chain really doesn't understand science? Now, all of a sudden, they translate that message to something that's very different than what the scientists, conveyed. Does this make sense? Right. So part of what we want to do and learn as we're learning to be scientifically literate is to look at our sources. Are these reliable sources? No. Right? No. You should be up here, right? Reading directly from the scientific publications or from reputable journals, right? From secondary sources that have a staff that have scientific knowledge, right? That have the skills and the background to interpret that information correctly. And we do have great secondary sources. We've got Scientific American, we've got Science, we've got Nature, right, which are all great journals that translate information properly. National Geographic, yeah, sometimes. Time, maybe not so much, right? So you have to, learn what are valuable, reliable resources and be careful where you're getting your science news from. Does this make sense? The translation process that happens is really important. We'll reference back to that a little bit more later on. Okay, so again, right, while not part of the core curriculum, right, scientific literacy is really important for understanding the scientific process, and that's definitely something that we're going to be learning about in this first week. So we're not only going to learn about the scientific method and scientific experimentation, right? We're going to hopefully teach you enough skills about how to interpret science and make sense of science and teach you enough foundations of biology that you can start to better navigate the information that you're seeing out in the media as you're making your decisions about what medications that you want to take or, how you impact the environment. So understanding a little science is important, right? Because it helps you from getting duped from pseudoscience-y stuff that's out there, right? So here's one of my favorite examples, these cans of folks selling dehydrated water. Right? Guess what's in that can?
Air.
Right. Just add water and you'll have water, right? And, oftentimes we buy things without thinking about it, right? Without like really thinking about the sciencey aspects, of what exactly it is you're buying. So we'll talk about that, right? How to be a smart consumer and not get duped by pseudosciencey stuff that's out there. Right? So what are we going to talk about for the rest of today's lecture and Thursday's lecture? We're going to talk about science, what it is and how it works. That's what we're going to start off with, a quick little discussion of what you already know about science. That's kind of the theme of Bio 10 this first week. You'll be doing the same thing in the lab, kind of brainstorming how much you already know about science. And then probably we'll get to scientific method a little bit more next class, scientific experimentation. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how scientific experiments work, what are the variables that we use. These are going to be very handy for you because you're going to be running a whole slew of different experiments in lab, and you're going to have to know what the variables are and how to name them and how to understand their role in a scientific experiment. And then if I have time, I'll get to patterns in science, or I might,
Ma'am, what the fuck are you doing? Trying.
let me see. I think I got it. All right. So I might turn this into a homework assignment if I run out of time. All right, we'll see how it goes. All right, so this is where I want to spend a couple minutes brainstorming with you guys. I want you guys to tell me, what do you think science is? What is science? And I'm not looking for a dictionary definition. I just want to know, what is science? What do you think of when you think of science?
Experiments.
Okay, so that's great. Experiments.
Studying how organic things work.
All right.
Also,
Trying to-
data. Oops, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cicely.
Okay, so it's like data analysis, and I guess some result based on the data. It's not like just imagination.
Like trying to understand the world around us.
Unless you guys have world.
A practical reason on why things are.
What else? If an alien came from outer space and said, dude, what's science? What would you say?
Be like a like an in-depth mathematical explanation for why concepts work the way they do.
What you're getting at is, maybe I'll put that there. What else? What are scientists doing? What are they? What is science?
I would say observation is a big key.
Observations. Good one. Dig deep.
The study of hypotheses and theories.
Hypotheses and theories.
Looking at patterns to explain things.
We love patterns as humans. Oh, we love establishing patterns. It makes us feel so good. And in control of understanding the world around us. Talk about this a lot. What else? I forgot to mention, you guys can, if you can help me with the monitoring the chat room. Sometimes it's challenging to be, it's hard for me to keep track of your faces. The lecture, the shared screens, and the chat room. That's put me a little bit over the edge. So help me out if folks are commenting on the chat room. What else do you guys have? What else is science? What do you think? Two more. Give me two more things.
Maya said the study of life.
All right. One more. What do you guys think? Science limited to life? What is science? What do you think about when you think about science?
There's
The
also like
scientific method.
Scientific method?
there's also like the technology side.
There is. Right. Let's do. Anything else other than technology? All right. Well, I did say one more. Okay. I'll give you a pass on that one. All right. So that's a pretty good list. Let's go back to this. That's yesterday's class list. So if we were to take a look at a dictionary, right? Here's what I looked up a while back, right? My good old Webster. The observation, identification, description, experimental investigation, and theoretical explanation of natural phenomenon, right? So it's you guys pretty much had this list, right? You had the observation, you had the identification of understanding how things work using data, making descriptions, running experiments, right? Formulating hypotheses and theories, right? And this is the one part where, I was trying to get you guys to think about how science is more than just living organisms, right? It's everything. You've got astronomy, you've got geology, you've got chemistry, right? You've got a lot of different types of science. It's just a way of looking at the world around us, right? It's not inclusive to just living organisms. It's any natural phenomenon that you happen to be looking at. Does this make sense? Right? So again, reflecting a little bit on what are our perceptions so that we can kind of go through and assess what's scientific process, what's scientific thinking, and compare that to what our view is of science, right? So we want to really think a little bit about the scientific process. So one of the really big important characteristics of science is that it's inquiry based. Pardon me. Dog just stepped on my toe. It's inquiry based. It's asking questions, right? It's making informed observations, right? Gathering evidence so that we can explain the world around us, right? The universe around us. And it is very much hypothesis driven, right? Formulating hypotheses that we can then test in an experiment. So we're going to be talking a lot about these procedures in the next lecture, right? We're going to talk about the scientific method, how we use observations and formulate questions, and how we formulate proper hypotheses. So this is a really important skill that you're going to develop this semester, both in lecture initially, and then all throughout the semester, you're going to be formulating hypotheses in lab. So we're going to drill this in so that you really understand the difference between a hypothesis and a theory, right? They're not the same thing. Right, so I'm going to talk just for a couple minutes. I have a few minutes left to talk about these, start talking about the characteristics of science and start to introduce our, scientific literacy information. And then I have a quick discussion assignment that I'm going to have you guys post on the discussion board on Canvas. So I'll talk about that in maybe like 4 or 5 minutes. But let me start off with characteristics of science. So I'll probably have enough time to get this list started, but we might kind of want to come back and recap and finish it up on Thursday. So first and foremost, we talked about this a tiny bit in the last slide. The characteristic of science that's really important is the fact that it is a methodological activity, right? You have a method, a set of rubrics, of protocols that you use when you are practicing science. And that rubric is super, super important, right? You have a standard set of procedures because, one, you want to eliminate bias. Remember that science is fact-based, right? You're trying to make an interpretation, gain an understanding of the world around you that is based in reality, that is based on facts, things that are verifiable and consistent with what's happening out in the world. And the way that we, kind of try to eliminate our personal bias, because sometimes we have an idea of how things work and we want to be right. That's the other big aspect of human nature, right? That sometimes undermines us, that, oh, we love to be right, right? So in science, part of that methodological activity and process is to help us to take our personal opinions out, to take any biases that we might have out of the equation so that we get the best accumulation of knowledge that we can, right? So the goal in science is to learn, to accumulate knowledge, right? It's not to drive a narrative or kind of promote your goals. It's to gain knowledge, right? It's the overall goal in science. And so there's a lot of protocols involved to help us make sure that we're vetting the information that we're presenting. And part of that is methodological activity. The other aspect of that methodological activity is that we want to have folks be able to replicate our work, right? Replication is really important for adding validity to our ideas, right? So, and this I think is kind of counter to everyday life, right? Just kind of hard to grasp. In everyday life, do you want somebody to copy your homework assignment? No, it'll get you in trouble, right? Do you want somebody to copy your exam or your term paper? Mm-mm. Do you want somebody to copy your business? Mm-mm. Replicate your magic formula? No. In everyday life, right? We don't want people copying us, right? Even down to you get irritated with your friends for dressing like you. That's my style, right? In science, you want people to replicate your work. You want people to copy your experiment, right? In fact, this is so important, right? That when a scientist writes up their experiment and presents their results, they actually have a methods section. And that methods section itemizes every single step that they took in running that experiment. Every aspect of the experimental design, down to the time of day it was run, to the reagents, the model of the equipment, the company that you bought your products from, everything is detailed. And you publish that. There's two reasons why, right? One, again, the goal of science is to share knowledge. So if you developed a technique for sequencing DNA or sequencing proteins, you want to share that with the scientific community so that other scientists can sequence other proteins, right? So that you're contributing to providing people with the knowledge and skills, the techniques that we need to advance our understanding of the world around us. You share, right? So sometimes we don't share in everyday life. In science, we share. There's a lot of collaboration as part of the scientific process. The other aspect of presenting every nitty-gritty detail of your work is that you want other scientists to look at what you did. And part of the publication process is peer review, where your paper, before it gets published, gets sent to other scientists that are specialized in the same field as you, have the same background knowledge, have the same, nuanced language, and they read your work and they critique the hell out of it, right? Scientists are sometimes assholes, and that's a really important part of the process of editing out bad information. They go through literally line by line and critique every aspect of your experiment. Because if you made an improper assumption, that would undermine the knowledge coming from your research, right? So other scientists are weeding out bad ideas, really important aspect of science. The only way you can do that is by assessing the nitty-gritty of what people did when they were collecting data, right? To make sure that that data was collected accurately and reliably. The third aspect, I'm going to add a third one, is that you want others to be able to replicate your work. So if you did this great experiment, you showed fantastic results on the effects of medication X, right? If you're the only one that can get those results, what does that say about your work? Kind of shady. Yeah. So you want to publish your research because you want other scientists to be able to replicate your experiment. Because if they replicate your experiment and they get consistent values that you did, that adds validity to your methodology and to your conclusions and to that data set. And if a third scientist can replicate it, right, and you get consistent results, right? It's through replication that we add validity to our ideas, right? And this is why science takes time, right? It's why we can't develop a vaccine in a month, right? Because it takes time to vet and run those experiments again and again and again and again, right? So that methodological activity, I can't emphasize how important that is in the scientific process. Does this make sense? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to stop right there because I think I'm out of time. I don't know how that happens so fast.